Head has developed a problem, spending a long time every day staring at the two red chickens sent by Shen Cuizhen. As long as he's free, Head will light his dry smoke pot, sit on the threshold, and stare at the two red chickens. Head has few abilities. He's honest. Otherwise, why would everyone call him Head? But for one point, Head is an expert at serving poultry. With the temperament of chickens, Head is very familiar. Chickens like to be in groups, and all poultries like to be in groups. Don't look at them scattered outside all day to dig for food. They're actually by family. After digging for food during the day, when it gets dark, they will go to their homes by themselves and never go wrong. Once a new partner arrives, you can't let them go, as letting go, they will run away. The key is to put them at home to isolate. Isolating for a few days will be fine. Livestock is different in this regard. Livestock is arrogant by nature, self-respecting and condescending, and can often hold their loneliness. For example, cows, donkeys. As they enjoy themselves, they are busy when they should be busy, and they are free when they should be free. They can truly be independent. Big Stick has gone, but the two red chickens came. In the first few days, the two red chickens were a little timid. They were only hiding in the corner, turning their heads sideways, stunning, and daring not to seize food with other chickens. Slowly getting used to it, it's all right. They are gregarious now. To Head, they are not only two chickens, but also Big Stick. Looking at them is like seeing Big Stick. Head cherished these two red chickens very much, even to the point of protecting their shortcomings. If any chicken dares to bully them, Head will catch the troublesome chicken and slap its sharp beak. While beating, he also scolds, "You motherfucker." These two red chickens were isolated by Head, but they were unwilling to lay eggs in Head's house. As soon as free, they secretly ran back to the haystack at Duanfang's house laying eggs, and came back after. While coming back, they shout, "Goo-goo-ga, goo-goo-ga, goo-goo, goo-goo-ga." This is to tell the owner that they have laid eggs. Head had a very caring heart and spent a whole day tracking them. The answer was found, and it was on the haystack of Duanfang's house. These two things eat inside and lay eggs outside. Head hated extremely. Holding a warm egg, he came to Pei Quan and told Pei Quan this situation. Pei Quan didn't say anything. On that day, Pei Quan beat Duanfang like that. Duanfang refused to fight back, so he felt a little bit afraid of Duanfang. Pei Quan said, "Forget it. Sell the two chickens." Head's neck was crooked, and he said, "I won't." Hongqi couldn't take this. To be honest, when it comes to dealing with Big Stick, Hongqi has never been able to take this. Big Stick is dead, but Net is still alive. Why? At least he has to suffer a little. Hongqi has always been loyal to Pei Quan. For no reason, Hongqi likes it. Hongqi likes to be loyal to a person so that he feels comfortable and can live a stable life. Hongqi will always follow Pei Quan and be an activist under Pei Quan. Hongqi decided to do something for Pei Quan, so he beat Net that afternoon. Hongqi quietly put a sack over Net's head, pressed him against the corner of a wall, and punched and kicked. No one saw it. Net's nose and head were broken, and he went home crying. Wang Cunliang pulled Net in front of him and asked angrily, "Who did it?" Net was speechless. Net said that his head was covered with a sack and he couldn't see anything. Wang Cunliang held his breath for 3 or 4. He couldn't hold it any longer, so he rushed to the corner and picked up a pole. Fortunately, Duanfang was at home. He grabbed him quickly and pressed firmly. Duanfang said, "Who are you looking for?" Wang Cunliang said, I'm looking for Elmhead. Duanfang said, it's not him. Wang Cunliang said, then who is it if not him? Duanfang said, it's not him. Wang Cunliang raised his head and said, who is it if not him? Duanfang said, it's not him anyway. Ned was plotted, and of course, Shen Cuizhen was the saddest. For Ned, this situation is actually very dangerous. Shen Cuizhen looked at the blood on Ned's head and rushed outside of the patio, and suddenly cried. She faced the empty alley, crying and cursing. Hongfen also came out, standing next to her stepmother, not crying, but her voice was even louder than her stepmother's. The mother and daughter, who were at odds daily, finally came together and worked together. They imprecated and cursed against the sky, against the ground, and against the empty alley. Hongfen's curse was vicious, fierce, and powerful, but no one came forward, and no one answered their words, not even a single person to console them. Till dinner time, Shen Cuizhen and Hongfen calmed down. What can they do if they don't calm down? In fact, they are aware that this thing is related to the family of Elmhead. It must be related. But without evidence, you can't gossip. Wang Cunliang was silent. Hongfen was silent, and Shen Cuizhen was silent. But being silent doesn't mean it's over. On the contrary, it's just the beginning. The whole family understands this truth. If this matter is not handled properly, troublesome days will be ahead, and there may be some dangers for Ned or Duanzheng. As the old saying goes, we are not afraid of thieves, but afraid of thieves' thinking. If people are always being thought about, living is impossible. Duanfang did not speak, but had a firm opinion. This can't be the case. He must let the people in one village see what they can get to provoke Duanfang's head. This matter must be stopped, and it will be stopped today. During dinner, Duanfang gave Ned a bowl of porridge, and he also filled a bowl, said a few words, and went out. Shen Cuizhen glanced at Duanfang, feeling extremely uneasy, and said, "What are you doing?" Duanfang said nothing. Shen Cuizhen chased after him again. "What are you doing?" Duanfang still didn't say anything. With net and a bowl in his hand, Duanfang wandered around and finally came to the river. Duanfang finally saw Pei Quan. Dalu, Guole, and Hongqi were all there. "That's good," Duanfang said to himself. Pei Quan and the others formed a small circle, each holding their own dinner bowl and talking. Duanfang walked up and greeted Pei Quan with a smile. Pei Quan didn't expect Duanfang to be so polite with himself, and he was a little surprised and quickly smiled. Duanfang also greeted Dalu by the way, as well as Guole and Hongqi. Duanfang noticed a small detail. When Duanfang greeted Hongqi, Hongqi took a small step behind Pei Quan. Duanfang saw it all in his eyes. Everything. Pei Quan just wanted to say something to Duanfang, but saw the wound on Net's head. Net was badly hurt. Pei Quan blinked a few times. Although he didn't know it, he could guess what was going on and looked at the people around him with his eyes. Duanfang followed Pei Quan's gaze, and the gazes of Pei Quan and Duanfang swept across everyone's faces. After scanning them all over again, Pei Quan's heart had several certainties, and Duanfang's heart also had several certainties. However, if no one mentioned it, it would be regarded as nothing. When Duanfang finished eating, he handed the bowl and chopsticks in his hand to Net and asked Net to take them back. Duanfang watched the Net go far, came to Pei Quan's side, and put a hand on Pei Quan's shoulder as if there was something important to discuss. Duanfang walked with Pei Quan for 4 or 5 steps together, took the rice bowl from Pei Quan's hand, and put it on the ground. Pei Quan didn't know what Duanfang was going to do. So he smiled uncomfortably and said, "What to do?" Duanfang said, "Pei Quan, you also saw that Manette was beaten." Pei Quan said, "It's not me." Duanfang said, "I know it's not you. You can't do such a thing." Pei Quan said, "Then what are you doing with me?" Duanfang said, "Manette was beaten by a dog." Pei Quan smiled and said, "Go find a dog." Duanfang didn't speak anymore. He suddenly arched his knee and slammed into Pei Quan's stomach very fiercely. Before Dalu, Guole, and Hongqi figured out what happened, Pei Quan had fallen to the ground. This time, Duanfang exerted all his strength, and Pei Quan's stomach was full. It was so painful that he couldn't speak, and he couldn't even breathe. "Go find a dog!" Duanfang shouted loudly. "If going to find a dog, I would lose my face. I want to be the owner of the dog, so I beat you. If a dog bites once, I beat you once, and if it bites twice, I beat you twice." Duanfang gasped and said, "Pei Quan, if you're not convinced, get up." Dalu, Guole, and Hongqi were all surrounded. Duanfang did not leave, but stood in the center of them. He was waiting. He was prepared with a thing at his waist. He thought about it. No matter who it is, no matter who he suffers from, he will ignore it. He only stared at one person today, that is Pei Quan. He was waiting for Pei Quan to stand up. Pei Quan finally got up. He didn't rush onto Duanfang's body. He just hunched over and gasped there. It looked like he couldn't fight back in a while. Duanfang didn't make another move, but took out a cigarette, took one, gave one to Hongqi, one to Dalu, and one to Guole. In the end, Pei Quan was given one. Pei Quan didn't take it. Duanfang's hand was there, and eventually he took it. Hongqi grabbed the match from Duanfang's hand and lit it for everyone. No one spoke. A group of people just stuffed their heads and smoked seriously. A cigarette is such a good thing that any man should have it in his mouth. Just smoking cigarettes, Duanfang changed the subject and started joking, without mentioning a word about Net. Duanfang was polite to Pei Quan, and Pei Quan was also polite to Duanfang. They were like friends for many years. But the people around could see that Duanfang had pooped on Pei Quan's head today. Not only pooped, but even peed and even farted. This time, Pei Quan was completely soft. He was such a candle that loosed a crotch of shit. When it was over, Duanfang snapped out the cigarette butt and threw it aside. Duanfang said, "Pei Quan, we will not talk about the past. I swear to God that from now on, I will not mess with you, and you don't mess with me." Duanfang was reasonable and said, "We call it clear, okay?" Pei Quan said, "Okay." Duanfang said, "You make up your mind. I'll ask you again, okay?" Pei Quan looked around and said decisively, "Okay." Duanfang said, "You're all surnamed Wang. What do you guys think?" The guy said, "Okay." Wang Cunliang had been standing behind a tree and did not come forward, but he saw it all, and he heard it all. Wang Cunliang was extremely relieved and suddenly remembered an old saying, "Raising kids like sheep is not as good as raising kids like wolves." Duanfang strolled outside for a while, and it was already dark when he got home. Unexpectedly, Sanya was at his home, talking to Hongfen. Shen Cuizhen and Hongfen were scolding in the alley for a long time this evening. No one came forward, and no one came to visit. Surprisingly, Sanya came over. It seems that this child is a kind-hearted person. Shen Cuizhen just talked about Net to Sanya, but Hongfen brought out her clothes from the bottom of the box. Sanya knew that Hongfen was going to get married at the end of this year. She had been busy with her wedding blouse these days, so she smiled at Shen Cuizhen and turned the topic to the needle. Shen Cuizhen glanced at Hongfen's clothes and went to the patio alone. Speaking of Hongfen's wedding blouse, Shen Cuizhen was quite sad. They are mother and daughter after all. Shen Cuizhen hoped from the bottom of her heart that she could handle this for her daughter. Hongfen didn't let her. Just didn't. Shen Cuizhen took a few secret glances when Hongfen was not at home. The needle and thread were as rough as dogs' gnaw. Alas, the girl's wedding blouse is too ugly. Where should she put her face as a mother? Shen Cuizhen was hard to say, and neither dared to say it. Just felt ashamed. Sanya came to Duanfang's house because she and her mother quarreled again. Of course, it's because of Sanya's marriage. Sanya turned back to another person who introduced the marriage. She didn't even see him and didn't know if he would like her, but she turned her back. Ever since the summer break, Kong Suzhen had been outside to ask people and finally persuaded one to see, and Sanya was dismissed lightly. As a daughter, how can you experience what it is like to be a mother? A mother has nothing else but to hope that her child will have a whereabouts and quickly settle the major events of her life. But Sanya also has Sanya's difficulties, mainly because her self-esteem is hurt too deeply. The matchmaker for Sanya generally knows the situation of Sanya's family, and it seems that they have negotiated it. The introduction is either the son of the landlord, the nephew of the traitor, or the nephew of the head of the regiment who returns home. Sanya has a feeling that all the matchmakers in the world are not playing matchmakers for her, but are working together to push her Sanya into the cesspool. Well, you push. I'm not seeing. Not at all. Kong Suzhen was anxious and asked Sanya, "Who do you think you are?" Although the voice was small, the meaning of sarcasm was full. Sanya said, "Who else could I be? Your daughter of Kong Suzhen." There was resentment in her words. Kong Suzhen said, "No, I think you are golden branches and jade leaves." Sanya said, "It's all thanks to you." This sentence was blatant. Kong Suzhen thought, and she had all the meaning to blame herself. But can she say this? A mother is not a fortune teller. How can I know which cloud has wind and which one has rain? If I had known that this was the case, I would rather sew my vagina than give birth to you guys. Kong Suzhen was sad. Her voice was soft, but her words were heavy. Kong Suzhen said, "A person enters the world with a good heart. Girl, your heart was fed to the dog." Sanya knew that her mother was wronged, but herself was the most wronged. Thinking about it like this, she was also sad, and her words were also heavy. Sanya said, "Your heart has fed me. How do you know that I am not a dog? I was born to be a dog." This sentence was a slap and hit Kong Suzhen in the face. Kong Suzhen was furious and said, "It's fine if you are a dog. If you're really a dog, the male dog will chase your ass. Why should I worry about this?" The mother seemed to be in a hurry and finally poked Sanya's most painful place. Sanya stared at her mother, tears welling up in her eyes. She suddenly smiled and said, "I beg you to stop talking, Mom. Don't talk about it. Please, help." Sanya's words have a source, pressing on Kong Suzhen's dead point. Many years ago, her father Wang Dagui went to the Water Conservancy construction site. As soon as he went out, the party secretary Wang Lianfang followed up, asking Kong Suzhen to help him. Kong Suzhen helped. After helping many times, Sanya bumped into them once. At this moment, Sanya brought out the word help. Although her voice was not loud, it was too fast to cover her ears on Kong Suzhen's side. Kong Suzhen was stunned and lit Dagui's cigarette pot. Kong Suzhen looked at the cigarette in her hand for a long time and said, "Girl, when you become a woman and a mother, you will go to my grave and kowtow loudly to me 9 times for your words." Sanya was holding Hongfen's wedding blouse, and she kept boasting about Hongfen's needlework, but she was a little absent-minded. She kept glancing out, but Duanfang just didn't come in. Sanya saw it, and Duanfang acted like there was no Sanya. Whether he did it on purpose or ignored her, whether he was proud or shy, Sanya was not sure. It's okay to be unsure. Duanfang's pride is charming, and Duanfang's shyness is even more charming. When a person is desperate, she tends to take risks. Bet. Gamble her whole life. Sanya thought about it for 3 or 4 nights and decided to gamble. If she lost the bet, she decided not to marry for the rest of her life. Fuck it, it doesn't matter. It's about fate. Sanya can do it. In fact, Sanya is not a strict girl. She was especially favored when she was a child. She can talk, dance, and is very lively. Go up the tree, go down the river. Whatever a boy dares to do, Sanya dares to do. However, as soon as she became sensible and knew her family background, Sanya was completely discouraged. It's good. Sanya has become a quiet girl, and it will save others from calling her a tomboy. But in the end, quietness is for others to see. After all, a girl's heart is still made up of the parts that others can't see. When it comes to the blooming moment, you think that every branch and leaf of her is shy, but in fact, it is rampant. Sanya was not sneaky. She was as direct as robbery. In the daytime, she stopped Duanfang at the gate of the cooperative medical care. Sanya had called Duanfang's name, did not bounce, and said softly, "I'll wait for you at the west of the river in the evening." A bold sexual urge, no less than a thunderbolt on a sunny day. Sanya left as soon as she finished speaking. Duanfang stood alone at the gate of the cooperative medical care, looking at Sanya's back like an idiot. Sanya had gone far, and Duanfang would never know Sanya's heart was beating severely at the corner of the alley. It couldn't be covered with a palm. It couldn't be tied with a rope. Duanfang stood at the gate of the cooperative medical care. At a certain moment, it was not Sanya in his mind, but his high school classmate Zhao Jie suddenly jumped out. This feels special. Like a newly healed wound, it doesn't hurt anymore, but it is surprisingly itchy. Duanfang was eager to reach out and scratch the itch on his body, but he couldn't find it. But one thing was certain. Along with the itch of this needle, Zhao Jie's image was blurred little by little, and Sanya was in its place. Zhao Jie, who had been haunting him, was so easily dismissed. "I'll wait for you at the west of the river in the evening." After dinner, Duanfang jumped into the river. He wanted to take a bath in the river. The big river behind the house was no longer a river. For Duanfang, it had become a huge bathhouse, which belongs to Duanfang alone. The river had been exposed to the summer sun all day, and the surface was already warm, and a thin layer of fog rose when night fell, making it more like a bathhouse. But the depth of the river bottom was still very cool. That was, Duanfang took a hot bath and a cold bath at the same time. This feeling was quite hearty, almost luxurious, and there were signs of unstrained. Duanfang was tossing in the river, but he was actually killing time, waiting for it to get dark. It was getting dark quite slowly, actually quite fast. It got dark eventually. And Duanfang quietly came to the west of the river with the smell of soap all over his body. The west of the river is a straight embankment with polonias planted on both sides of the embankment, like a dark underground tunnel. The sky was getting dark and firm, and the paulownia leaves above the head were rustling. But there was no wind on the ground. How come is it the trees want to be still, but the wind does not stop? It is completely the wind wants to be still, but the trees do not stop, like trembling uncontrollably. Sanya suddenly appeared in front of Duanfang. To be precise, Sanya's heavy breath appeared in front of Duanfang. Her snoring was like the snoring of a little female donkey. Two bold black figures were standing on the embankment like that, and no one dared to take any rash action, which was a bit terrifying. The two just stood there as if their lives had been waiting for this moment. Sanya's decisiveness and bravery were manifested at this time, and she didn't want to wait any longer. Sanya threw herself directly into Duanfang's arms. There was no transition at all, directly turning waiting into results. Sanya's face was pressed against Duanfang's chest. She hugged Duanfang's waist, hooped him tight, and dug him to death. This was the first time Duanfang's body had come into contact with the girl, and Duanfang dared not to move. Duanfang could no longer find his breath. It doesn't matter if he can't find it, just breathe through his mouth. Sanya raised her face, and her little female donkey snored at Duanfang's face. Duanfang held Sanya's face up with his big and rough hands. This is Sanya's face, like an oval egg. Duanfang held Sanya's face in his palm, not knowing what to do next. Suddenly, lowering his head, he pressed his lips to Sanya's lips. Duanfang himself did not expect this movement to be so precise, even more precise than snowflakes hitting the ground. They sneaked around and started calling each other's names. Sanya, Duanfang, Sanya, Duanfang, Sanya, Duanfang. Duanfang didn't know what to say or what to do, had no idea. He didn't know, then used his strength. Duanfang was savage, and Sanya couldn't breathe. She wanted to take a breath, so she could only open her mouth. Sanya opened her mouth to the limit and let out a desperate but ecstatic sigh. She wanted to yell. Sanya's mouth had just opened, but Duanfang learned by himself that his tongue occupied Sanya's mouth at the fastest speed. The tips of their tongues were like two distressed eels, mingled, full of toughness and explosiveness. They immediately discovered a secret from the tip of each other's tongues that could never be revealed. An amazing secret, an earth-shattering secret. A strange feeling suddenly penetrated into Duanfang's heart. Almost at the same time, both of them had a shock, a highly dangerous feeling that really scared them. They stopped. However, the danger did not occur. Well, there was no danger at all. Like escaping from a tiger, escaping from death. Escaping from danger often in turn inspires people's courage to just think about coming again. Come again, one more time, one more dangerous time. One more earth-shattering, one more escaping. They were no longer kissing, almost fighting. They opened their mouth as if biting, wishing they could put each other in their mouth, chew them up and swallow them. They were biting tightly, sucking viciously, as if nothing could be meaningful otherwise. Duanfang, it's worth dying for this night. How can we die? There is still tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow. The next night, they did not go to the west of the river. Anyway, the west of the river is open air, so they don't like it after all. Now, what they like and need most is a house. As long as there are 4 walls, even a cowshed, even a pigsty, that can put themselves in, that would be good. Duanfang was Duanfang eventually, and he had an idea. He took Sanya to the classroom of one village elementary school, where he was in the elementary school. It was summer vacation now, and the school was very empty and silent, like a cemetery. And all the doors and windows of the classroom were tightly sealed. Duanfang sneaked into the school quietly and decided to climb the window. After pushing a few times, he lost his patience and smashed the glass on the window with a fist. The shattering sound of the glass was abrupt and melodious, opening irregular long holes in the silent night. Duanfang squatted down and listened alertly for a while, and there was no movement. Duanfang quietly pulled the latch, picked up Sanya, and stuffed her into the classroom. Then, hunching, he went in. The whole process did not interrupt any souls or ghosts. Duanfang closed the window again, and now everything is in order. The classroom has become a paradise, a dark, silent paradise. In paradise, darkness is another kind of magnificence, another kind of splendor, an invisible brilliance. Duanfang and Sanya couldn't see each other, but they both had triumphant smiles on their faces, and because they were silent, they naturally became part of the night. They started kissing again, imminent, but didn't find the right place. In just 3 or 4 times, they found out. Once come up, they go all out, a bit like a last-ditch effort, with the kind of energy to do everything they can. They don't kiss, they eat. However, they are not full. The more they eat, the hungrier they become. Duanfang grabbed Sanya's breasts for no reason. Duanfang grabbed them as if Sanya's breasts were no longer breasts, but a life-saving straw. As soon as he let go, he would die, and once he let go, he fell into the bottomless abyss. Sanya heard Duanfang's labored breathing and knew that Duanfang likes this place, and Duanfang needs this place. Sanya covered Duanfang's hands, moved Duanfang's hands away, lowered her head, and started to unbutton her. Sanya's chest is clean and straight, which is her pride and her most glorious secret. But unfortunately, Duanfang can't see it. If Duanfang saw it, he would definitely love it and cherish it even more. This part of Sanya is her holy place. Since Duanfang likes it, Sanya will give it to him. She's willing to do anything. Sanya took off her floral blouse and hung it on Duanfang's shoulder. Although Duanfang couldn't see it, he knew that Sanya's upper body was completely naked. Duanfang was afraid. Sanya's actions were too precious. Sanya put her lips to Duanfang's ear, not with a voice, but with a trembling breath, to ask him, "Duanfang, do you like it?" Duanfang responded with the same trembling breath, "I like it." Sanya was particularly moved, and it could be said that she cried with joy. Duanfang's answer gave Sanya extra encouragement, and Sanya said, "I'm all yours." This sentence was bold. It can be said that there is no turning back. Duanfang relied on Sanya's tone to clearly see Sanya's expression, which is the calmness that only the fearless. Sanya's composure has a touching and shocking power, and Duanfang's heart is suddenly afraid. Duanfang said, "Sanya, are you afraid?" Sanya said, "I'm afraid. What about you?" Duanfang said, "I'm also afraid." Sanya raised her head and said, "Actually, I'm not afraid. As long as I have you, I'm not afraid of anything." Sanya peeled off Duanfang's shirt. She loves this place. It's the place where she first fell in love. Their chests were pressed together. It was an absolute hug. It's more like owning, undividable. It is flesh and blood. If they are separated, it will inevitably be accompanied by blood. They are caring, agitated, wild and powerful. However, both of them felt peaceful, clear, sentimental, and powerless. Their arms were so soft that they had a desire to cherish and care for them. They both felt good. Wanted to cry. Refreshing. Duanfang caressed Sanya's two breasts. He was good to this one, but worried about neglecting that one. He just comforted that one, and then worried about neglecting this one. He was in a hurry. Tranquility was broken again. Clarity was also broken, and once again, agitation and wildness prevailed. Duanfang held Sanya's nipple in his mouth and sucked tenaciously. Every time Duanfang took a sip, Sanya felt that something was pulled out of her body, and she slowly emptied. Like a flying fox, it became a part of the wind, and there were signs of weakness or loss. And Duanfang became stronger and stronger, and all his strength was concentrated in a certain special place. Duanfang ripped Sanya's pants and pressed on Sanya's body. Sanya knew that the time had come. The time had finally come, and it was time to feed him with her body. Sanya has nothing but her body. Only the body is Sanya's only bet. Sanya won't keep it. She's going to put all the bets on it. All of them. But Sanya didn't cooperate with him immediately. She put her legs together, arched up, and protected her lower body tightly with her knees. Sanya put her mouth all the way to Duanfang's ear and wanted to say something to Duanfang. After thinking about it for a long time, she still didn't know what to say. Sanya whispered, "Duanfang, kiss me." Duanfang gave her a kiss. Sanya said, "Kiss me again." Duanfang kissed again. Tears welled up in Sanya's eyes. Sanya said, "Duanfang, kiss me again." But Duanfang couldn't wait. He separated Sanya's thighs, pressed and pushed it in. Sanya grabbed Duanfang's arm tightly and said, "Brother, Sanya has nothing left. You have to be kind to her."